So let me start by welcoming. This is the 7th annual Richard Stone Lecture. Today's lecture is going to be given by Jean-Marc Robin from Sciences Po University in Paris. I just want to say a couple of words about what this lecture series is for, why it was set up. It was instigated in memory of a contribution that Richard Stone made to the university and to the Faculty of Economics in particular. So Richard was the first director of the Department of Applied Economics, which is now part of the Faculty of Economics. I guess what I want to kind of stress was the key principle of his work, or what I think of as the key principle of his work, which is really one of consistency. Now, there's two sides to what I mean by consistency, and I'll tell you why it's relevant in a minute. Two sides to this consistency. One is that when economists analyze data, there's a key role for economic theory in understanding the data. And the flip side of it is that when we're looking at economic theory, it needs to be consistent with what the data says. Now, taking that seriously is something which Sir Richard Stone was a very key part of what he did. And it's this key principle of consistency that I think underpins the work of Jean-Marc's work. Primarily in labour markets, models of search and microeconometrics, but throughout it, it's been this principle of consistency. So what I've learned from Jean-Marc's research over a number of years, and I don't want to kind of go through the details of what he's done, but what I've learned is that economic theory has value only if it helps to organise our thinking about the patterns in the data. And similarly, analysing data without having a structure for thinking about the choices being modelled means actually we learn very little about the underlying behaviour. So those are the kind of two principles that I think I've learned anyway from what Jean-Marc does. And I think particularly what he's shown is at a time when, as economists, we become particularly increasingly specialised in econometrics or in theory or in particular areas, what Jean-Marc, I think, has shown is that it's necessary, I believe it's necessary, that you're both a theorist and an econometrician. So recognition of this is in his award of the Econometric Society, the Frisch Medal Econometric Society, for his paper on search, and numerous other awards. But that's about all I wanted to say. So let me just now pass on to Jean-Marc and say it's my great pleasure to invite Jean-Marc to present 2015 Sir Richard Stone Lecture.
Thank you very much for this kind words. And I hope to be up to the level that's set by comparing what I'm trying to do with what Sir Richard Stone has been doing all his life. But and indeed, what I'm trying to do in my work is I'm trying to relate economic theory to data using up-to-date econometric tools. And so there is, in particular, one very important step in this enterprise, which is the study and the elaboration of what's called identification in econometrics. So, in particular, in this paper, I spent quite a significant amount of time trying to discuss why it is that my model is identified, and showing identification is giving a credit to the following estimation. So this paper is about understanding or modeling marriage formation. But it's going to be also about labor supply and home production, because home production is going to be the main mechanism why people decide to marry instead of remaining single. I'm going to use BHPS data. Still, although I've been working on that for quite a long time, the estimation is not quite finished, so this is still work in progress, but I'm going to show this is joint work with Marion Bousset, who's just got a job as an assistant professor at Université Laval in Quebec City, and with Nicolas Jacquemet, who is a former young colleague of mine at PSC, before I moved to Sciences Po in Paris. I'm also first give you one first motivation for this work that relates to the literature on intra-household allocation. So since for a long time, economists have been interested in modeling intra-household allocation, and in the mid-80s, also there's been some sort of intellectual revolution in economics under the push of Pierre-André Caporet, who has started thinking about intra-household allocation as a simple Edgeworth box problem, and so you can view intra-household allocation as a simple exchange. He considered the household as a simple exchange economy where each household wants to maximize its utility, subject to the utility of the other member being greater than a certain threshold. So if you don't have any way of saying which threshold is significant, then there is an infinity of Pareto equilibria, and what you observe will reflect possibly could reflect many different selections of a point on the Pareto frontier. And what this literature does is that what Pierre-André Caporet showed is that in certain cases, if you have enough data, and he shows what kind of data you need, you can identify not only the utility of each member in the household, but also what is called the sharing rule, which is how you select the point on the Pareto frontier. And in order to do so you need to have variables that were called environmental distribution factors, which help you select data, which determine the point on the Pareto frontier that is selected. So these distribution factors can be wage ratios between household members, or institutional features like people schools or sex ratios in the region or the country, etc. So but the point is that this choice of a point on the Pareto frontier is, for a large part, arbitrary. This is coming from outside the theory. You give me some way of selecting where you a point on the Pareto frontier, then I can identify everybody's preferences. So that's one way of thinking of it. Before that, the usual way to think about household decision was using bargaining models. And what you can easily see is that if you don't have any theory on how to select Fred points in a bargaining model, it's pretty much like before. And fundamentally, there is bargaining models and Pareto, say, efficient allocation models have the same empirical content. So in order to go further, you need a theory tying the Fred points to individual preferences, and that's what my paper or our paper is about. So what we're going to do is that we're going to start from a recent paper by Robsheimer and Lone Smith in Econometrica 2000, which is a search matching model a general search matching model, simple, relatively simple, and that's always the case with theory. I mean, when you make an advance, a theoretical advance, the models are always very simple and too simple to bring to the data. And so some people have to beef them up and to make them interesting. So that's what I'm trying to do. I try to start from the prototypical model of Scheimer and Smith and augment it with several features that, in order to make the model empirically interesting. The Scheimer-Smith model is a search matching model with Nash bargaining, and the thread point that we are going to have here is the value of remaining single. So you meet a potential partner. What's the outside option is to remain single. And compared to those thread points and current individual preferences are going to be connected for several reasons. One reason is that we are going to assume that individual preferences for private consumption, so private consumption, private leisure, are unaffected by marriage. You don't change your taste by marrying. So that's a strong assumption because it's certainly not true. Maybe you don't start liking leaks just because you marry, but because of habit formation, you may very well turn liking leaks if your partner imposes you some leaks in dinner. So we are going to rule that out. There won't be any change in preferences. You have to maintain some politics, and so that's this is going to be one assumption. Another assumption is that ties thread points and preferences is that we are going to people are forward-looking in my model, so that married people know that in the future they may want to divorce. And singles know that if they keep on searching, so that's really at the heart of search theory, you can keep on searching. And if they keep on searching, they may find a better match than the current opportunity that they face. So these are some important ingredients of my bargaining model. So another important modification with respect to Scheimer-Smith is that we have to explain why is it that people prefer to marry instead of remaining single. So there has to be some externalities which are generated by marriage. So in the standard Scheimer and Smith model, I mean, these externalities are embodied in some production function with complementarities. Here, we make this assumption more interpretable by assuming the existence of a public good. And so when you marry, there is some household production process that involves domestic time uses, and the externality may come from the fact that there may exist some return to scale in a household production. I mean, by being two in the household, you can you can produce more than just by being alone. So maybe, and then there is also something else that is going to be important that we introduce this notion of public good quality, which depends on both spouses' characteristics. And so one important empirical question is, can we separately identify the part of the household production function, which is the total factor productivity that comes in front of the production, and can you separately identify the different elasticities production elasticities in the household production function. So I showed that in the setup that I consider, I mean, we do have this identification. The other thing that we do compared to this formal model is that there will be a mechanism to generate divorce, match separation, and this mechanism will take the form of shocks to a persistent match specific component. So if you are unlucky, you draw a bad value for this match component, and then the household surplus becomes negative, and you divorce. Economists always have a very poetic language. So identification. Why is it that? So we are going to show that the model is identified, including the bargaining power coefficient, not only the thread points, but also the bargaining power coefficients, and there's some important conditions. So first of all, we make use of the fact that we observe two types of time uses for each individual in the household. So now labor has got back the issue, which was absent from the title. I'm sorry about that. So labor supply is one of the time uses that we observe, and also we assume that we observe the time inputs in a household production. And those time uses are observed for both spouses. So that means that we have two, in the language of collective models, we have two private consumption goods which are observed here: labor supply and household production time. That's not enough. We also have that is, we show that under this condition. So we use another condition for identification, which is that we have two sets of instruments. One set, one type of variables are supposed to determine preferences but not home production, and we need another set of variables that determine home production but not preferences. As I said, it's important that we have a mechanism for divorce that makes the probability of divorce not constant. So here it's going to be it's going to happen because it's essentially the same mechanism that is responsible for matching and separation. Both are going to be efficient responses to the news. Which comes in the form of the match specific shock that I was referring to before. Another important assumption that I'm making is the assumption of stationarity, so that we can use the steady state restriction as an additional source of information. You will see how we do that. And one thing that is important is that, so I don't think it goes against identification, but it makes our life much simpler. That is, we are going to rule out corner solutions. Everybody is using at least some positive labor supply and some positive home production time. In terms of the literature, I already mentioned Pierre-André Capori and his work and all the co-authors like Martin Browning, François Bourguignon, etc. I have worked with him on the development of the theory of collective models. I just want here to make some references to more recent work. So in particular, I'll be using a search matching framework, and that's different from, there is an alternative, which is to use a perfect information assignment models, like in the work of Chu and Sio, and also Pierre-André has been doing some work in this area too. So before, so in fact, what all this means is that we are moving from a state of the research world where people were interested in modeling intra-household allocation to a new stage where you also want to model match formation. So it's not only about intra-household allocation given match formation, but it's also about match formation. And then you have two ways to do that. One is to use search models. That is, you think that chance plays a big role in match formation. You search the market, and at some point you may need somebody, and you have to decide whether you want to form the match or not. And if you don't, continue searching. But an alternative is to remain in the paradigm of perfect information. It's in the Walrasian world. And so now you think that you have all women lining up on the wall, all men lining up on the other wall, and you try to assign each one to each other one. That's what economics is about. I mean, it's many labor economists are very happy with the assumption that wage is equal to labor productivity, and it's not the assumption, that's an outcome of an equilibrium model. I don't think that anyone thinks that effectively wage is exactly equal to marginal productivity, but they think that it's a first order approximation that works well. So I think Pierre-André Capori is clever enough to understand that those perfect assignment models don't describe exactly how things work, but they capture the essence of the mechanism. So what are the reasons why I do prefer the search matching framework? So it has to be. So I think I have some arguments which relate to tractability. In particular, it is easier if you to incorporate dynamic behavior in models where you don't have to worry about strategic interactions, because such matching models in general assume that at the same time that you have some local negotiation mechanism that's going to determine prices. So like the wage is determined by Nash bargaining at the moment that an employer and an employee meet. The alternative is to assume that you play a Nash equilibrium, and so firms are posting wages, taking into account the distribution of wages that all firms are posted. So those search models are missing maybe some important aspect of the equilibrium, with those some important strategic interactions. But at the same time, because you don't have this complicated equilibrium to solve, then you can put more things into the model. And so in particular, it's easier to incorporate dynamic behavior, forward-looking behavior in such matching models, I believe. Although there is a recent paper by Chu that shows how to do that in these frameworks, but it's very messy. Another thing is that by definition of such models is that you have information imperfections. So, and if you have imperfections, then you have if you have frictions, you will have imperfections. And here, the type of imperfections that you get is mismatch. And so it's interesting to have an economy, to have a model in which you allow for mismatch, meaning that not everybody is paired with his or her optimal match. So why? Maybe that's because I believe that in reality that's a thing that may happen, and so the third point is that I do believe that search contains some realism that is such models contain some realism that is interesting. You spend a lot of time searching for many things, and so I think that's I tend to think that this is the one first imperfection. So if you want to think of adding into the perfect equilibrium model imperfections, I mean, which would be the first one? Is it adverse selection? Is it moral hazard? No, I tend to believe that it's imperfect information. You don't know necessarily, you don't know where is the next parking. You want to go to the theater and you don't know where is the next parking slot that you can find. Or you don't know where is the next available job, etc. So, the last point is that in macroeconomics, such matching framework is kind of become standard now, and in particular in the literature that is related to what I'm talking about today, which is the marriage market. So there are quite a few macro papers that relate to the marriage market, and which want to address questions such as why do we see a declining marriage rate, what's going to be the effect of increasing female evaluation rate, etc. Or they ask questions about what is the role of policy for like divorce rules or whatever. So, and they very often use such matching frameworks for the reason that of tractability that I was talking about before. And so my model here is going to be very much like one of those macro models, but with individual heterogeneity and contrary to what macroeconomics is about. I mean, I put more effort in identifying underlying heterogeneity or the effect of heterogeneity on behavior. Okay, so before going into detailing the model, let me first give you some of the facts that we are interested in, and we would like the model to be able to fit or predict. So in the rest of the talk, I'll start with some empirical facts. Then I will describe the model. Then I will talk about identification. Then I'll show you some results. Okay, so I'm going to use the British Household Panel Survey. For one good reason is that this is the only panel data set that I know of which has both labor supply and information on domestic time users for both spouses. If you know other data sets, I'd be happy. I think the PSID now does that, but it's relatively recent, and it was in the BHPS from the beginning. So it's very precious. I don't know, as I said, I mean it's the only data set. Lucky us, I mean we could find one which has this feature. Because we are going to make the assumption of stationarity, and we don't want it'd be very important to be able to model aging, because it's certainly age is certainly a very important aspect of a very important characteristic in the managed market. So, but that's for the future. For the future, I mean, I have some ideas on how to do that, but it will make the model a bit more complicated. So in this paper we abstract from that. So what we're going to do is we're going to select relatively young people that we treat as homogeneous in age, and young means here between 22 and 36. And the data providers, the survey provides us with data on wages, number of hours normally worked per week, number of hours spent in a week doing housework. So because we, as I said, we don't want we want stationarity. The wage, what we do is we transform wages. So we purge the wages from experience effects. That is, we regress log wages on age, and we take that out of wages. And we keep only working individuals. So that's big restriction on the data. At the moment, that's what we're doing. As I said, for identification, we need variables that determine preferences only, and we need variables that determine household production. So the variables that are going to determine private preferences, that's easy. It's the wage. And the reason is that what we're going to use is the indirect utility function. So the indirect utility function is, by construction, a function of the price of leisure, which is the wage. So the wage is going to be an instrument for preferences, and we need an instrument for household production. So what we did, we made use of certain questions that there are in the BHPS that tell us something about, we say family values, but as you can see, it's not only family values. So adult children should care for parents. Okay, maybe that's family values, but cohabiting is always wrong. These are the questions that they ask in the BHPS, and you answer on a 1 to 5 scale. Divorce is better than unhappy marriage. Man should be the head of the household. But then there are questions also about religious habits, homosexuality, etc. So we put all that together. We run the factor analysis on this, and we take the first factor, and we call that a family values index. And here you have the factor loadings. So which says that cohabiting is always wrong. That's contributes to the factor with a weight of 0.19. And what you see is that's the factor analysis done for low education people, and those for high education, high school, and in college graduates. And what you see is that the factor analysis is basically the same. It's quite independent of education. That's I think it's remarkable. So we're going to use this variable, the first factor, and because here you have many questions, it's going to be a continuous variable, essentially continuous variable, and that's the variable that we're going to use to determine home production, and that we're going to exclude from preferences. That's a big assumption, but you need to make some assumptions. To show you that there are some interesting facts related to families. So here I have this is the trends in wages and family values for single men, for single women, for married men, married women. What you see is that married men, so that's the wage of married men. So it's trended because we didn't detrend the data. So part of the trend is the aggregate trend. What's striking is that the wage of married men is positively trended over time. It's higher than the wage of anybody else. Whereas the wage of single men is constant. The same works for female workers. Here, that's the wage of married women. And here, that's the wage of single women. So you see that there are very significant selection effects. It's not the same population in terms of wages. I mean, it's not the same people who are singles and who are married. Here's what you have in terms of family values. So, and that's what you see is that, surprisingly enough, as far as I'm concerned. Married men tend to be more traditional. Men tend to be more traditional than women, and the trend is more pronounced for women than for men. That is, women tend to be less and less traditional, and at a faster rate than men. Interesting. So part of the analysis that we want to do is we want to take these trends as exogenous, and we want to know to test whether how much they are responsible for changes in time uses, because that's what you. So there are also trends in education, but not so much. You know them. So this is college graduates. This is high school graduates. This is less than high school graduates. For single men, it is relatively stable. For men, you tend to have more. Married men tends to be more educated over time, and it's true for single women, and it's true for married women. So there is a tendency to become more educated for women, that is more pronounced than for men. That's something that is well known. These are the trends in labor supply. You see that there are some trends in labor supply. So married men tend to work a lot, and there is a negative trend, which is not steep. And this single men work less than married men, and you see that they tend to work less than this. So part of it is so that's intensive margin. It'd be very interesting to have labor market participation in addition. So that's for the future. And this is for women, and you see the reverse. So these are married female, and you see that something happens in the late 90s. In the 90s, so you have a trend so married women tend to increase their participation to the labor market, and then it levels off. And this is for single women, and you see here it's 36, and here it's 4. So even single women work less than single men. Okay, so that's labor supply as a function of wage. Single women, married women. So you see that the distance between men and women narrows with on wage. And this is home production time uses for married female, single female, married men, single men. So surprisingly enough, single men spend even less time in home chores than married men. What the Mono has to say about this? So Kun, where are you?
Oh, I'm married.
So that's the link between time uses and family values. So labor supply, married men, single men, and what you expect, married. So the more traditional a woman is, and the less it is going to work when it's work for wage when she's married. And here is the reverse for home production time uses. More traditional women spend much more time doing home production. For the link between wage hours and education is the same as okay, so these I think are interesting trends and patterns. So one question is, what kind of structural model we can build, which will allow to generate those links. So That's the game that we're going to play, and that's the challenge. So what is the model? So we are going to have a number of men. So let's think of a stationary economy in which there is a certain number of men, a certain number of women, very close to each other. The number of singles is denoted with an N, and the number of married couples is denoted with an M. And these are endogenous heterogeneity. We are going to assume that individuals vary in certain characteristics. So in the empirical analysis is going to be the wage, the family values index, and education, but it can be anything. So when we say I here, we mean any type of individual characteristics that you want to think about. And so we denote as Lm of I the distribution of characteristics in the total population of men, and M of I, that's the number of single men of type I in the economy, and that's going to be endogenous. And F, that's for women, and F, that's for women, and Mij, that's the number of married people, such that the man has characteristics I and the woman has characteristics J. So these are even with this specification here, you see that Mij is therefore a distribution of 6 variables. So what is the joint distribution of W, LVI, LI, WJ, FVG, etc. So that's when it comes to do the empirical analysis. I mean, this is something that's not trivial to estimate. In terms of meetings, matchings, and separation, we are going to restrict to assume that only single individuals search. That is, there is no search for an alternative partner during marriage. That's a big simplification. But one that we are doing. So maybe in some evolution of the model we have on the marriage search. There will be random meetings of singles via a meeting function. So here I don't specify it. I suppose that there is a meeting function that depends on the number of single men and the number of single women in the market. And this meeting function allows us to calculate what is the meeting rate for men and what is the meeting rate for single female. And so if I call lambda the ratio of this divided by that, lambda times NF, that's the number of meetings divided by the number of men searching, that's the probability for a single man to meet a single woman, and lambda F, which we find as lambda times NM, so that's the number of meetings divided by the number of searching women. That's the probability for a single woman to meet with a single man. That's standard in the macro models of the labor market. That would be called a matching function. Here I call it the meeting function because there is also matching probability, which is going to be endogenized, but at this stage, let me define it. Mr. I meets Miss J. They have a probability, alpha ij, of consummating the match. And the reason why it's a probability and not just an indicator function is that I assume that there exists a match-specific component Z that is drawn at the moment that they meet. So this Z is drawn, and that's the component that is making that's giving the matching probability its stochastic character. Divorce, and divorce, that's a shock to Z. So for the same reason that maybe some Z high enough are going to make this match feasible, then a negative shock to Z may generate separation. What use can you make of the steady state restriction? So here I'm writing the assumption that the economy is in a stationary state. So this is the stock of married people of type IJ. Here I'm calculating the outflow from the stock. So what is the outflow? That's the proportion of these married people who divorce in a unit of time. So in order for divorce to occur, there has to be a shock to Z, and this happens with probability delta. And then the shock to Z has to generate divorce, so that it has to make the match not consumable enough, and this happens with probability 1 minus alpha ig. Now, what is the inflow? The inflow, you can work it out this way. So in order for a marriage of type IJ to be created, there has to be a single man of type I who meets a single woman with probability lambda n. This single woman is of type J with probability NFJ divided by BNF, and the marriage is consummated with probability alpha ig. So if I replace lambda m over NF by lambda, then I get a symmetric expression. And this is very useful for empirical purposes because it allows me to relate this probability to the densities that you can directly observe in the data. So there will be, that's how we identify the matching probability, and then from the matching probability, we are going to be able to back out the structural parameters. So one thing that you can do is you can marginalize this, that is average over J, and that gives you a condition that relates the distribution of single types among men and the distribution of single types among women. Okay, preferences. So we assume that individuals draw utility from consumption, leisure, and some public good Q. So that's the direct utility function, which is conditioned by individual characteristics. This is the indirect utility function. That's a function of some income and the public good. So what is the indirect utility function? That's the maximum utility with respect to private consumptions, not NP, subject to a budget constraint, C plus WE. The wage is the price for leisure, which is less than 1. And we're going to assume this specific form of the indirect utility function, which is chosen so as to ensure transferability later. So that's because we are assuming this particular indirect utility function that we will be able to define the concept of match surplus, and then the match will be formed only if the surplus is positive. It is destroyed if the surplus becomes negative. And then, in addition to that, there will be rent sharing, with a fraction of the total surplus goes to the men, and a fraction of the total surplus goes to the women. And this rent sharing will be determined by Nash bargaining. And from the indirect, and you see something that's important is that we assume some very simple multiplicative form between the public good and this part of the utility function. So that's a very specific form of complementarity between the very good and the rest. And this one is very useful to bias some simplification in the solution to the equilibrium. And from there, you can use Roy's lemma to calculate leisure and consumption. Home production is a function of time uses for singles. It's indexed by their type. For couples, it's a function that involves the time use, the amount of time used by men in home production activities, the number of hours used by the female spouse in home production activities, and also some consumption good. So, one way of thinking about the property good is children. So children, and children consume. They consume C, he consumes C naught M, and she consumes C naught F. And so, what you will need, in order to finance C, the man and the woman will have to save some income to transfer it to the children. And the kind of production function that we assume is very simple. It's a sort of Cobb-Douglas production function, or Stone-Geary production function, where the male type conditions this parameter here, the female type conditions this parameter there. Both male and female types condition this parameter here, and you have elasticities here and there in addition. And that's for singles. In front of the production function, we have this TFP, total factor productivity parameter, which we call public good quality, which has a deterministic part, that's function of spouses characteristics, and the match specific component here in front of it. So you see, and when we talk about identification, we want to assume this structure, but we don't make any restriction on how C depends on ij, any restriction on how D1 depends on I, any restrictions on how this one depends on J, and we don't make any restriction on how this parameter depends on education or wage and whatever you want, and this one. Okay, so the identification that we derive is semi-parametric in this sense. These functions are going to be non-parametrically identified, subject to this structure. As I was saying before, if you work out, so what is the total income that are for single individuals? That's the wage times what's left after spending time in home production, or if you want to think of it, C naught is W times 1 minus D minus E, and 1 minus D minus E, that's labor supply. So C is equal to W times H labor supply. And what we call R is this, after putting back the value of leisure here. For couples is the same, except that in addition there is some amount of savings on the male side, and some amount of savings or transfers in general. I mean, it's not that it can be positive or negative on the female side. And this plus C, it has to sum up to 0. And then you work out you sum this to this, you get this, and this implies that basically C is financed by individual transfers. So now I have to say, what is it that they have to negotiate about? So how do we define a marriage contract? So they don't go to the judge before going to the notary, or I have to rush. So they have to sign.
You have 15 minutes.
Yeah. So they sign, but I prefer to spend time on the model. So individuals are going to sign a marriage contract, which is a function of utilities, instantaneous utilities that they're going to enjoy, and continuation values, which upon the next match specific shock. So you have to say ex ante how much you're going to give the man and how much you're going to give the female when following a shock to Z. And so then you can calculate what is the present value of such a marriage contract to the man, and the same applies to the woman. So that's the flow value is equal to the instantaneous utility. With probability delta, there is a shock to Z. Z becomes Z prime, and you draw Z prime from distribution Z. The match, then, what is the continuation value? That's either the value of being single or the continuation value in the marriage. And if you continue here, you lose what you have. You currently have WM. So that's the Bellman equation that determines the value of the contract to the men, and the same applies to the women. And so what they do next is they determine those utilities, UM and UF, which are given by the formula that we had before. They have to determine home production so as to maximize the Nash criterion, which is so that's what they get if they marry, and that's the third point, the value of being single. That's what the female gets if she marries, and that's the third point. And this has to be maximized subject to the feasibility restriction and subject to the participation constraint. The promise-keeping constraint implies that the current value of the match has to be equal to the continuation value for this particular Z that they have drawn, and that allows you to calculate to work out this Bellman equation for the value of marriage for the type I for the man, the type J for the woman, and a match specific component Z. And then once you have that, you can calculate the value of leisure, which is the maximization of the indirect liquidity function for the period. With probability lambda, they meet this guy I meets a single woman. This single woman is any type from the distribution of single women, and they marry only if the value of marriage minus the value of singlehood is positive. So this plus is max over X and single. And that's the value for singles. So what is the equilibrium? The equilibrium is going to be the solution to this plus the equations that we had before that determine the densities. Because you see here in this equation, for example, married single individuals have to guess what in equilibrium the distribution of types among single individuals is going to be. And so they know that this has to solve the equation, the steady state restriction that we had before. So at the end of the day, what you have is the equilibrium is such that you have to determine two things, those values and those distributions. In principle, it's a very complex problem to solve, but it happens that we can do that relatively easy. So, under those assumptions that I have made about the utility functions, this linearity with respect to income is very important. So one thing that we do is that in order to quantify the value of marriage for an individual, what we use a concept that is comparable to wage, to the wage. So that is, we are going to calculate an equivalent income that you have to give. So suppose that this is the value that you get in marriage. That this guy of type I gets in a marriage with a woman of type J when the match specific shock is Z. So this is what he gets.
we're going to change this variable into something that is more interpretable. So we're going to look for an income that you have to give him so that he is now indifferent between being single and get his wage WI plus this income. Now, so it's like a reservation. So this mu has to be positive for the marriage to occur. And so we can calculate one for female and one for male. And that's going to be the value of marriage for the man, given his type, given her type, and given Z. And that's the things that we are going to calculate in the empirical analysis. And that's so in terms of separability, in terms of the solution. Given the time, I have to move on. So what we do, we show is that you can calculate. So the first thing that we show is that under these assumptions, you have separability. That is, domestic production can be solved independently of transfers. That's a very, 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 very important property that allows to solve the model equation. And the second thing that we show is that there is transferability. That is, there exists a surplus function that is shared between spouses, and marriage occurs only if there is positive surplus. And the surplus, we show, solves a relatively simple Feynman equations. Of course, those values of singlehood have to be calculated. And then once you have that, you can derive transfers, Tm and Tf, using standard equations in Nash bargaining models. So it's heavy machinery, but it is relatively easy in the end to do. I mean, it's much easier to do than to use dynamic programming models. I mean, it's not everything requires, it can be done analytically, but the only thing that has been done numerically is this equation. So this equation, suppose that you were doing dynamic programming, you were using life cycle models with a terminal condition. I mean, that would be, that's where it is. That's the dynamic life cycle model. It's in there. It's just simplified a bit. You just have to solve for this fixed. So Hamish, I mean, that's where you are. Identification. So for identification, we, as I said before, I mean, we have to make these assumptions that I already talked about. And so what we prove is that the first thing that, in order to identification goes through a series of steps. The first one is that you can identify preferences and home production for singles just by using the information of time users for singles. So first you look, you use data for singles, and that, because you make this assumption that preferences are the same for single and married individuals, that under these instrumental conditions, you can prove that preferences and home production for singles are separately identified just from single time use only. Then in the second step, you can use you can identify home production for married couples from domestic time uses for married individuals, plus some measure of what the household spends for private consumption. An aggregate measure of total expenditure for both spouses. So we don't use all the information on leisure. We use only an aggregate for some aggregate information for leisure. Then in the third step, we back out public good quality from the matching probability. The matching probability is identified from densities, from distributions, as I said before. And then in the last step, you can identify the bargaining power coefficient and the distribution of the match-specific shock from the specialization in labor supply and of married individuals, which we have not yet used until now. So it's a series of steps that makes the identification problem possible, solvable, and that makes the estimation problem also tractable. Because if you were to use, say, indirect inference to estimate all this, I mean, you wouldn't know exactly which moments to use. You wouldn't. You have too many parameters for it to work. Here, by following these very simple steps, we can produce a non-parametric estimation of all the parameters that I've been talking before. And I don't have the time to get into the details. It's quite heavy. I mean, there's a long appendix, but it pays in the end to do this exercise, because what you get is a feasible, tractable estimation procedure. And credible at the same time. So this is the empirical specification that we're doing. It's not true that in practice we are semi-parametric. We make some assumption about preferences. We want backward bending labor supply, so we have a quadratic A function, etc. We are semi-parametric only as far as this the deterministic component of public good quality is concerned. So let me give you some results in 5 minutes. So this is how the model does in terms of capturing the trends in time uses that I showed in the first part of this talk. So the dotted lines are the model prediction and the model simulation. And so it does quite a good job. So what we haven't done yet is here we estimate different parameters for each year, basically. The only parameters that are fixed are the parameters of the meeting function. I mean, we couldn't, because in order to estimate the probability of divorce, you have to see people divorcing, and that requires a relatively long span of time. So the only parameters that are fixed are the parameters of the meeting function and the divorce rate, the delta. And apart from that, you see that the model, this simple specification, because at the end of the day, it's a very simple model of the economy, given the amount of things that we are trying to capture, it does a pretty good job. So this is the bargaining power coefficient. That's also great that we are able to identify it. And this is the money metric value index. In fact, the share that goes to the woman. So that's so remember what this is? The mu is, you take a married couple and you calculate how much you have to give her and how much you have to give him, so that they are as happy being single than being married. Okay, and then you can compare that. The advantage is that you can compare this measure between men and women. And so in particular, what we do here, we take the ratio of mu f to the sum of mu m and mu f. That's a better measure of bargaining, because it's one that incorporates not only the bargaining coefficient, but also the threat points. Okay, the nature. I mean, you have two things that give market power to bargaining power to individuals. First, the coefficient that there is in the Nash bargaining coefficient, the beta, but also the Fred points. Somebody who has a higher Fred point is going to be able to extract more rent. And so what you see is that it's quite relatively close to 0.5 on average, but less than 0.5. So that means that on the top of wage inequality between men and women, there is an additional rent sharing inequality. But I mean, the values that we get are reasonable. Okay, it's not, we don't get 0.2. We get something which is close to 0.5. We can calculate that by education. And what you see is that, so here we are wife with a college education, wife with just high school education, wife with high school dropouts, married to men with this or this education, etc. What you see is that so what the share that goes to the women doesn't depend very much of the education of the men. The differences there are quite small. What you see is that there is a negative trend here, which means that the more educated the woman is, and the less rent she extracts. Interesting. This is the welfare index now in level in the wage space. Here you have female wage, here you have male wage, and these are level curves. So moving that way, you increase the value of marriage. So that means that a woman with a high wage married to a man with a high wage has the highest value of marriage. So, or to put it another way, if you increase the male wage, you increase the value of marriage. If you increase the female wage, you increase her value of marriage. So now look at men. You go up going that way by increasing the male's wage. So the value of marriage increases with his wage, but it's pretty stable with respect to her wage. So basically, men are indifferent in how much his spouse returns home. So there's a stark difference between those two things. Here it's in the family values index and index space. Male family values index, female family values index. So it's more difficult to see what's going on here. So, but what you have basically is that it increases when you go this way, not so much when you go that way. So that means that the value of marriage increases for women which are more traditional, but they don't care very much about whether their male spouse is traditional or not. And here, it's kind of weird, I don't know how to interpret that, because it tends to decrease going that way. So that means that the value of marriage tends to decrease the more traditional they are. And the value of marriage, here you see, increases, is higher here. So those who win, the men who wins, are the untraditional ones married with traditional women. That's those who extract the biggest share of the rent. One thing that you can do also, using this monometric, is you can values that you can add it to wage. And now, married individuals are just like single individuals. They just being married, they have an additional non-earned income that adds to their wage. And so you can calculate between couples inequality and within couples inequality. And it's sort of reassuring that there is much more between couple inequality than there is I don't know if it is reassuring, but the fact that there is sorting and shows in the fact that there is much less within couple inequality than there is between couple inequality. So that's reflecting positive sorting in the economy. We wish we will calculate correlations later, but that's for the moment that's what we do. Okay, and that's about all that I wanted to say. So I'm quite fascinated by this work. I mean, we've been working on this since 6 years. Okay, always trying to refine them all to get something that works better, and so we have been improving them all quite a lot over this term. And I think now we are getting something that is satisfactory, where we are able to have a model that is able to integrate many I mean a significant number of exogenous characteristics that allows to describe the dynamics of data well. For once, you do non-parametric analysis, and at the end you get something that's not silly. That's a bit the drawback with semi-parametric analysis, is that you work a lot, and very often what you get is totally messy. Here it seems to be relatively well behaved. So there are extensions that we want to work out. One is we are missing a lot, throwing away non-participating, non-labor market participating individuals. So that's something we need to do. Also, aging is a very important aspect, and remarriage, second marriages is something that would be very interesting to introduce in the model. Clearly here we allow for second marriages, but they are like the first marriages. I mean, there is nothing that makes the second marriages different. And in general, when you remarry, you're older than when you first married. And so what you see is that the age differences for first marriages are much smaller than the age differences for second marriages. So there must be something that we are missing here. And I'm not going to summarize to come back on the results, so you can read it if you want a reminder. I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much. I'm sorry for being so long.
Questions?
Can I ask an initial question about your data? When you said it's sample age 22 to 36, is it those age 22 to 36 at the beginning of your data set and then them being tracked through? Or is it all the people who are between 22 and 36 at any stage during the 1991 to 2000?
That's it. That's for sure.
And if so, do you exit from the sample when you become 37?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Can I then ask a supplementary, which is, why would we believe that that subpopulation is in steady state?
It's
because the main cause of marriage disappearing from that sample is that people exit from the sample because they're 37. It's not.
So we do see some people splitting. I mean, we do see a lot. So when you look at divorce rates, you see that it's, divorce duration. It's a bimodal distribution. So there is a high probability of divorcing initially, and then maybe after 7 years, it rises again, and then so we are missing the second bump in the marriage in the divorce probability. So that's in that. So it's a model for early divorce.
Yeah, but the point is that what I'm trying to make is that the majority of people who enter your sample because they've transitioned from being 21 to 22 are going to be single. Whereas, and there will be more people in that category who are single, whereas the exits are going more likely to be married.
No, I agree. So I don't know how to answer this. As I said, I mean, it's the main drawback of this analysis. So it's a representation. The thing is that it's the same. I mean, it's a common representation that we keep over all years. So it's an ideal type, and so we contrast the data to this particular ideal type. I'm not claiming that the divorce probability that we are estimating here is the right divorce probability. I mean, so more work is needed to get something better. But I think it's already capturing, I hope it's already capturing something from what's truly happening. If it is not the case, so the question is, how do you? The only reason why the only use that we are making of the stationarity assumption is to relate this probability to those densities. So basically, it's an assumption about the fact that this alpha is increasing when this increases with respect to that, something like that. So if maybe that this captures still something of the reality. I mean, it must be that alpha is increasing in m and decreasing in those n. So it's think of that as a parametric specification linking probabilities to densities.
So I've done some work on marriages myself. Then, if you then try to identify what equals marriage means, then usually there are a couple of things. And one of the main things is parents. The income of the father, the education level of the father, the education level of the mother, and things like that. Do we have any parental variables?
No. That's because you are for the upper class.
Well,
I mean, come on.
Which is, if you have a society without class, it's Denmark.
No, I mean, you're right. Of course, there are tons of variables which are missing. Yes, definitely. So think of it as how much to wage, and so I mean that's. I hope that you others are willing to use this model and use different sets of characteristics. That'd be very interesting. Yes. Is it? Could we use? But I mean, more seriously, could we use background information, family background information, instead of this family values index? That'd be interesting to try, and definitely using. Family background instead of family values to as the instrument for home production. Maybe it would be better. Maybe that's a very good suggestion.
So as I understand your model, you'll have enough bargaining for every period during the match. Just wondering, do you think of something like a prenuptial agreement? It sounds to me like that's sort of specifying your outside option for at the point of the match.
So there is a debate in the literature, and what's the extent of commitment that you should assume in marriage contracts? Seems to me that the question has been determined in favor of no commitment. So because what forces individuals to renegotiate if they want to renegotiate? I mean, it's kind of, so here they don't need to renegotiate every period. I mean, if they're happy with the initial contract, they continue like that. But at some point, if they need, so because there is a shock like this Z, in fact, that's when they are going to renegotiate. It's following a shock. Okay, so when Z when new value of Z is realized, then they renegotiate. And I think that's a reasonable assumption. So there is no reason to, nothing is going to be changed until the moment, vis-à-vis what they first negotiated, until the moment that there is some change in the environment that changes the rules of forces one makes one of the two maybe to want to research.
So in some ways the key assumption you make is this assumption that your preferences are independent of the other person. There's no non-separability between
no altruism,
leisure and women's leisure. There's no altruism either. So that allows you to use the kind of symbols as the kind of benchmark. When you do upper calculations, you don't need to make that assumption, do you? Because you use this non-metric impression.
Yeah, but I don't know how I could. I don't know if I could identify a model in which there would be altruism. It's not clear.
But even for the altruism, there was just no non-separability.
Non-separability even here. I mean, the way you would allow for non-separability would be to make my utility a function of the utility of my wife, or a function of something that relates to her. So
yeah, but my utility from consumption from leisure could be a function of my wife's leisure.
So here it's captured in. Okay, so how do I think about this coefficient here? So it's the fact that I'm very happy to marry an educated to have married an educated wife, because it's not much more pleasant to talk to my educated wife so that's here. So there is. So that's where so my utility depends on something of our characteristics through this parameter there, but it doesn't directly depend on her labor supply, for example. So what I want to rule out is this. I want to rule out that my preferences would be directly affected by her choices about leisure and domestic time. But I mean, I do believe that this is very important here. This thing is very important. That's the main source of positive externalities in marriage.
Yes.
I'm a little troubled by the rate of divorce equal the rate of marriage. Empirically, in your sample, was that the case?
It's not. No. It's the rate of divorce is different. So, what is the rate of? It's not the rate of divorce. It's
well, the number. The number.
No, but that's probably the rate. That's this delta times this. So
Okay.
the rate of divorce is what is the probability that a shock occurs first, and then conditional on the shock occurring, what is the probability that this results in the two of us efficiently willing to separate?
Let me rephrase it. I'm worried by the number of divorces being equal to the number of marriages. And so the question is that empirically the case in your sample?
So, what this means, not really that this is equal to that. It means that the difference between this and that is small with respect to the level. So, net flows are small compared to gross flows. And this has to be true because, I mean, we don't see the distributions of characteristics to change dramatically from one period to another. So think, I mean, another instance where something like that happens is for unemployment rate. You can calculate unemployment rates from stocks, that is in March of each year. What's the fraction of individuals who are unemployed as a with respect to the active population? Then you can make a similar assumption like this one. Assuming stationarity, you would get that the stock of unemployment should be equal to the layoff rate divided by the layoff rate plus the job finding rate. In equilibrium, that's what you get. Now you can plot unemployment calculated from stock together with unemployment calculated from flows in this way. They line up exactly on top of each other. Although the layoff rates and the job finding rates move a lot over time. So the reason why this happens is that gross flows are big in comparison to net flows. So that's the only thing that we assume. We assume here that m dot is negligible compared to.
Your answer seems complicated.
Okay.
Say that delta is the divorce rate plus the aging rate. Answering your question, that moves you out of the sample.
Yeah, but then you have to allow for the fact that it's also the rate moving you out of the sample, because in fact, if you did this for a whole population, supposing you didn't worry about aging, you would have to have the total number of marriages is equal to the number of marriages dissolved by divorce plus the number of marriages dissolved by death.
No, you're right. I mean, here I was a bit too. So what I need to do is to model attrition. So initially, I mean, I didn't bother about that, and you're definitely right that I have to allow for some source of exits and entry. So basically, what you have an additional constant here, which is the attrition rate, and an additional constant here, which is the newcomers into the market, and then we would have something that is internally consistent. So that's a very good point, and I need to do that.
Okay, I think we should stop there, and everyone's welcome to join us for drinks in the hall. And just remains me to thank Jean-Marc for a very interesting talk.